other objections and signed on the dotted line like within like 5 seconds, which is kind of interesting. But I think it gets back to our earlier discussion about science and rationality and the engineering aspect working on its own, and then the political pressures put on top of it. So if we look at something like ballistic missile defense in that context, well, from an engineering standpoint, yeah, sure, it could work, right? I mean, you're not violating any laws of physics. Is it effective? Is it militarily effective? Is it cost effective? Is it practically? Is it a practical system? You know, offense is generally easier than defense. You know, it's you know, potentially easy to overwhelm a system. And if one were to look at it from an engineering or scientific prism, these types of limitations become very obvious. But the prism becomes colored when you put political considerations on top of that. And you know, we talked about the risks of science, we talked about the risks of technology. That's where the risk comes from, right? It's not the system in and of itself, but when somebody overlays their articles of faith or their politics on top of that, and does the anti-Richard Feynman and does not look at the limitations and make policy and make political decisions based not on the actual capabilities of a piece of science or engineering, but what we as sort of like a PR or as a political sense would like it to believe, as Richard Feynman said, trying to fool nature. I think that's where you get into trouble.
Right. Yeah. Just getting back to the ethical discussion for a minute. You mentioned before that the idea that every scientific advancement has made us a little bit better in some way. Can we postulate, or what are your feelings if, since religion seems to have largely failed in making people better, is the end game, the long run of further scientific advancement and exploration, an improvement not just in the area that's been discovered, but also in the general human condition?
I don't think that, you know, I don't think these two topics, you know, religion and science, because that seems to those seem to be the two that always seem to be at odds. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, because for as far as we push the envelope in space exploration, and I think the most poignant examples of that is what we're seeing now with Hubble. Right, the fact that we're seeing the actual, you know, the absolute edges of the universe, and can be able to put a number on how old the universe is and what it's made up of and all this kind of stuff. I think, you know, that's where sort of religion kind of comes in and helps us as humans cope with what science is bringing forward, and they kind of sort of leapfrog over one another. You know, we push science, and then we're like, geez, we can't explain that. You know, well, maybe is there a potential religious explanation that can shed some light, and then that kind of plays back and forth. I think you see a lot of that going on, especially in the subject of you know, biogenetics and things of that nature. You know, that whole debate, which is an entirely separate evening here for you. But I think I don't like to look at them as entirely mutually exclusive, and I think we as humans can't make them mutually exclusive.
Well, if science is a rational pursuit, and you know, for us to be happy, for us to live good lives, these are rational goals, and hence, you know, outside of the other non-science influences that I talked about earlier, certainly, yeah. I mean, the goal of science should be the betterment of humanity.
I have a question directly related to what you're saying that poses it. I asked the question to myself, why is it so important that we as a species continue? Why are we so special? I was thinking about before Copernicus, man thought there was a center of the universe that was special, And then you were talking about Carl Sagan. You realize there are billions and billions of galaxies.
He never actually said that, of course.
Something like it. That there are countless there's a possibility of countless other life forms out there. Why is it so important that we continue? That we have 6.6 billion people left on this earth. Why is it so important that we sacrifice really the quality of their lives so a few continue? How do we live with ourselves knowing that we're doing that? Doesn't that show how much we've corrupted ourselves and how our morals have diminished that we're willing to do that to ourselves?
Again, I would argue that those are the drivers of that inequity that you mentioned is not science, but the things that are non-science. There are economic and political reasons why that inequity takes place. And that's, I think, outside the realm of science. And I do maintain, I still think that the proper application of rationality in science is the way out of that.
You want to comment?
Oh, go for it, man.
I don't know if you had to.
I don't know. I think then again that raises the interesting line of questioning of just in terms of what you're talking about, like what makes us so special that we should survive above anybody else. And I don't think necessarily science is trying to answer that question. I think science is a way is a tangible way that the natural born instinct for humans to explore the environment and the world in which they live manifests itself. So I don't look at things like space exploration or any kind of scientific development as a guarantee that I'm going to live till 200 on the moon of Titan, like a moon of Saturn or anything. I just look at it as an opportunity to contribute to society and perhaps develop technologies that improve the life in which we live, improve the environment in which we live, and carry on that way.
Okay. You could bring that on to that.
Well, can we have a round of applause for our two speakers? So I'll just briefly take my CFI hat off and put my CSS, Canadian Space Society hat on, and let you know that we do in our magazine shelf area back there, where we're now actually carrying a series of magazines, science and humanism, that sort of thing, but we also are proud to include the Canadian Space Gazette, which comes out seasonally. If you are interested in these sorts of topics, Kevin and Eric are published quite frequently, as well as many others in this industry. So what you're looking at is actually the very late spring issue. We're a bit behind, but anyways, you're the first to see the cover of that. So this will be on the shelf this week. So thank you for coming to this event, and we always try to push the envelope a bit and explore broader questions. Just for your information, there is a new flyer for September and October, which should be coming to you if you're on our mailing list. If you haven't gotten it by now, you're probably not going to get it if you don't sign up. So please put your address on our sign-up form. Just to let you know, we do have a lot of events coming up in early September. We're doing actually a whole series over the next year on what we call a campaign for freedom of expression. And in this series, we're going to have a lot of interesting topics. We're doing a banned book day in mid-September at the University of Toronto, probably the Fate Center of all places. And then we're going to have P.Z. Myers, the famous blogger. He'll be here Halloween. In late October, we're having a mentalist, a skeptical mentalist, James Biss, who will be presenting here and at a local campus in mid-October. We have Nika Lally, an author, coming in September. So a lot of events just to kind of welcome the new school year. So please do come out to those and grab the new newsletter to remind yourself of the upcoming events. And that's about all for me. Some of us will be going to the pub. Speakers are invited. You're all invited if you want to join us. Just hang around by the door. And otherwise, have a great night. Thanks a lot.